Welcome to the Rapid Enablement Podcast. We're helping connect you with the latest tips, insights, and strategies on what it truly means to build and run a high performing sales enablement function. Let's dive right in. Sharon, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you here.
Really thrilled to be here. Thank you, Taylor.
For those who don't know, Sharon Little has spent the last 15 years as a leader in sales enablement with some amazing companies. So some stargazers like VMware, Infor, Rubrik, and Amplitude. So a wealth of knowledge there. And in addition of that, she spent some time at Sirius Decisions as an analyst and has recently, in the past few years, wrote a book on enablement, which we'll get to. So very exciting to cover that. Did I get that right?
You did a very nice job. Thank you so much.
And for those listening in, today's topic is why sales enablement must evolve in 2024 and beyond. And I should say 2025 since
we're getting very
September.
close, aren't we?
Yeah. So the first thing to kick us off, certainly we've seen a lot of change in the past 15 years, but as we get closer to 2025, how do you feel about the progress we've made overall as sales enablement as an industry?
I think about this frequently, and there's no question that enablement has made significant progress. If you think about, where we were 10-ish years ago, I think in the early days, I would answer the question, what is enablement? Probably once a week for someone who is curious about what we were doing. I think we're past that now, and we've built some bench strength out there. Certainly the fact that, we're not just hiring in the Bay Area for talent like this, we're going across the country and across the world to find people who are particularly well suited to enabling those in customer facing roles. We've made a lot of progress, but I think we've got a ways to go. I started out my career in sales, like I think many of us do. And a lot of times I'll go back and I'll think about some of the experiences that I had prior to getting into enablement. And my early management career was with a function that at that time was either called inside sales or telesales. Today, it would just be called corporate sales. And within the tech community, there were a group of us, mostly women, who were spearheading these trial teams almost. Companies would see it work somewhere else at Oracle or at HP. And they say, hey, we can do that too. We're going to give that a try and see what happens. And they'd find someone like myself to run it who would come up through the ranks of using a telephone to close business. And there was a group at that time started by a woman named Annika Seeley. This is a name that may be familiar to many of you. She called the group the Telebusiness Alliance, if I'm not mistaken. And in those early days, we would get together probably once every 2 months, talk about what was going on. And there was so much passion and energy in that room. And then years later, when I had moved on to enablement, I was invited back to speak to this group about what enablement was. And I was so struck by the differences in just the energy in the room. So a bigger room, more people, more men in the room, more of a relaxed vibe, if you will. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that this business function had really crossed over, if you will. It was no longer something that people were trialing. It was something that was known to be a necessary and needed part of how you conducted business. And while I think we're closer to that with enablement, I think we're still not quite there yet.
And why do you think that is?
It's a couple of things. I'll bring things into present day and talk about the conversations that I have with chief revenue officers. And I like to, for my own education, ask similar questions just to see what folks are saying. And one of the questions that I ask most often is, tell me about a great enablement experience from your background. Can you describe what that was like for me? And I will tell you, I've yet to have anyone actually answer that question with a direct answer. They always answer it, but it almost never is an example of modern enablement. It's interesting, right? Because I can go back in my career a decade or two or more ago and tell stories about the various training and how I came up through the ranks. but not everyone has had that experience. And so they may not necessarily be going into enablement thinking about this from a strategic standpoint.
And in terms of when you're talking to those folks, are there any signs of progress that you feel we're making, especially when
Probably
talking to CROs?
you can sense that they're looking for more. So that is good. The thing that comes up most frequently is I need my enablement team to be more proactive.
Mm.
I need them to come to me with programs and thoughts and ideas. And I'm just not getting that from the team that I have in place today. And whenever you have a question like that's being asked frequently, I think there are a couple of different ways to look at it. The first one is, did you set the team up to function in that way to begin with? From a reporting structure, from a background and experience structure, have you had them at the table for the conversations that are happening with
Right.
the business, to make sure that they're able to incorporate what's being discussed into their work? And I think in too many cases, the answer to that is not entirely or
Right.
no, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's very common.
Some of it's reporting too. They'll put enablement, honestly, in just some unusual places in the company. I've seen it reporting up to marketing. I've seen it reporting up to sales operations, to a pre-sales function. And sometimes that can work and be beneficial. Every now and then you find a particularly skilled individual that has some vision around what enablement and what it means. But truly, for it to work, it is a function that needs to be above the line for a chief revenue officer, and for that chief revenue officer to understand that this person needs a seat at the table, needs to be part of the conversations. They're not necessarily going to respond in the same way as everyone else at the table, but
Right.
they're able to see what are the challenges that are occurring in the business and how can we apply enablement to them, and how do we prioritize our work, because as Taylor, none of us enablement ever have enough resources. So how do we prioritize our work so that we can make sure to contribute to moving the business forward?
So it sounds like really by having your enablement folks as close to the executive suite as possible, as well as in those strategic meetings, it sounds like that's going to really help you maximize your enablement.
I think so. I think for me, one of the skills that has been most helpful in my career is the ability to see patterns in things. If I'm part of a conversation, listening to questions and concerns, I can connect the dots between those elements and figure out how enablement will apply. Now, enablement won't solve every challenge that you're going to have in the business. I want to say that because I think sometimes that can be a challenge for all of us as well, where if something is broken, it must be an enablement problem. It isn't always, but in those
Right.
cases where you can apply enablement, you have to have some connective tissue between all of those elements to figure out exactly how to approach it.
Yeah, it sounds like enablement's really the glue.
It is, I think, particularly from a go-to-market standpoint. So you think about traditional sales operations being the glue between finance and field operations. Um, Enablement is performing a similar function, although in a very different way, between marketing and go-to-market and the sales organization.
Mm,
I think of it more as a hub function.
yeah, that's this the central hub. It sounds like.
It
um,
certainly feels that way sometimes.
yeah. So with that, when you mentioned being proactive and having teams be more proactive, what can an enablement leader do to be more proactive or meet that proactive bar, if you will?
I do think it's very important to talk about that, right? Even if the wish list is to have that seat at the table, when it's not possible or available at a given moment, there are definitely things that an enablement leader can do to make sure that they're being proactive with the work that they're doing. I would not, starting a new job in enablement, really dig in until you built out a business plan that you've socialized and had approved. And then understand that is a living, breathing document
Mm,
that you should update at least once a quarter and continue that socialization process. Really important that you're not surprising anyone with the work that you're doing, and that you're having really impactful conversations around the trade-offs. here are the 10 things we could be doing. Here are the 6 things we can deliver really well. I'm also a fan of enablement QBRs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
QBRs is part of how just about any sales success team runs their business. It's how the communication happens between teams. And there's absolutely no reason why a sales enablement leader can't have their own QBR, invite all of their key constituents, and really present what they did for the quarter, what they're planning to do for the next quarter, what went well, what could have gone better, and get that kind of feedback. And that, believe me, will be seen as proactive.
So those QBRs, that's really interesting. How often do you run into that? Do you see a lot of organizations doing that, or?
I have done it in the past. I wouldn't say that I've seen a lot of organizations doing it, but I think it's something that would be received well for any enablement leader who wanted to propose it. And if you put it together, put it on the calendar, I promise you people will show up for it.
Are there specific function heads or folks that should be attending these?
Sure. The key leaders, I think, are certainly all of your senior sales leaders, your chief revenue officer. I'd love to see the head of product marketing there, the head of customer success, the leader for your SDR team, your pre-sales team. Those are the key teams that an enablement function serves on a day-to-day basis. And very important that they're in the room, that they understand not only the broad vision for enablement, but what you're delivering for their business partners. So you might have a particular quarter where the success team is a huge focus. And it's important that sales knows that, understands the reasoning behind and why the work that you would typically do for them might be a quarter out.
Okay. And then having these every quarter, it sounds like just keeps that momentum going.
And it keeps the conversation going, which is what you really want. And it's not always easy. I think anyone who's been to a QBR as part of their career, sometimes this is where the tough conversations are had. But if you don't have those conversations, that's where you start to get this sense of discomfort in the organization, that maybe things aren't running quite the way that feel optimal for everyone involved. I would lean into it for those looking to drive deeper, more strategic conversations with their peers.
So it sounds like, if I'm hearing correctly, enablement leaders, we need to start doing more QBRs for ourselves.
You don't seem excited about that one, Taylor.
That's a lot of work. Yeah. But it sounds like it's worth it.
It's a bit of work for sure. You know what? Do it as a trial. Do it as a trial, see how it goes. Ask permission to have a second one.
That's great. With that said, is there anything else top of mind that you found as we look at 2025 coming up? How can enablement leaders be more proactive, or how they can evolve?
Sure. Thinking about this on a deeper level, you want to elevate the conversation, right? And make your discussion, whether it's in a QBR format or in a different format, at the level of professionalism that these folks that you're talking to are used to. And a big part of that is metrics. And metrics is a whole conversation in and of itself, but you definitely need to start tracking hard metrics. And when I say hard metrics, I'm talking about productivity metrics, the impact that the enablement team is having on bookings and revenue for the business. And this will probably take some partnership. You're going to need some folks in sales ops to support you, need some folks on your business intelligence team if you have one. But having that data will give you the opportunity to really dive in and show the impact that enablement can have on the business. In every situation where I've been able to pull numbers like this and to measure them over a period of time, they tell a really impactful story. The place that I would start, in addition to talking to the business partners that I just mentioned, to see if you can get their help with something like this, is to baseline the work that you're doing today. So onboarding is one example. So almost every enablement team is involved in onboarding, unless for some reason your company is not hiring right now. But if we focus on onboarding specifically, if you're able to do a baseline for previous onboarding cohorts prior to, say, launching a new onboarding program, and then be able to measure the difference, those are some real numbers that you can talk about within the business. Other things that I think are critical are around product launch. Ideally, when your company does a product launch, it has some very specific targets in mind for what they want to accomplish in the first quarter or the first half for the year, specific to that product launch. And enablement plays a huge role in getting a sales team ready to sell a new product. So if you can anchor the work that you're doing to those numbers, that can be very impactful. And the list goes on, right? It's fairly detailed in terms of what you can measure. I like to take a look at what I call leading indicators, which are pipeline-based metrics, because in my experience, that tells 95% of the story in terms of the health of the business. I don't know that there's any company that I've worked at in the last 10 years where there hasn't been an initiative around building a pipeline, helping people to build pipeline, grow pipeline, convert pipeline. All of those things are incredibly important. And if through the proper training, you can drive those metrics up as well, that is a fantastic story. But the best way to go about that is to baseline where you are before you start and then continue to measure it over time.
So really ensuring you're digging into those metrics and watching those evolve and making sure you're shouting those out when you see a difference.
And comparing over past periods, right? Similar to the way that a public company will do for financial reporting. You know, how does this quarter's numbers compare to the same period a year ago, previous quarter's numbers? You know, get used to telling stories in that way because your audience is used to having conversations in that way.
That's great advice. And it sounds like too when you start to implement those things like benchmarking and metrics, and then you add on the QBRs, it sounds like you're really able to build that enablement function as you idealize it.
It should have some connectivity, right? The thing that we haven't talked about just yet is really how you anchor enablement to initiatives for the business. Most companies will have at the corporate level key initiatives for a year. Your chief revenue officer will have the same for the revenue part of the business. And there are probably, let's say, out of 5 initiatives, 3 or 4 that enablement can have an impact on. So you think about you have your core programs for enablement, and then you have these specialty programs that you might run for a quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, a year, depending on what's happening with the business. And again, having goals and metrics associated with those and having a way to measure them, and then regularly talking about the impact that you're having in a QBR environment, you start to see how the dynamic changes.
Wow, that's great.
In a positive way.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Sharon, I know we're coming close to time here, but I did want to touch on the book. Given your extensive experience, really excited. It's called Salescraft, The Enablement Advantage. Do you want to share a little synopsis?
Sure. So the book's actually been out for a while. You can find it on Amazon either as a copy that you can touch and read or something that you can listen to. I think it's really a good book for a couple of different audiences. Certainly for a new enablement leader, really trying to think through the structure of their enablement function and how it fits into their organization. So that's one element of it. And it's also a great book for a chief revenue officer that doesn't have a lot of familiarity with enablement, or even a CEO, particularly in a startup environment, trying to understand this function a little bit better. Because I think sometimes in organizations, they wait to staff an enablement hire.
Right.
And it's a year or 2 or 3 in where this investment is finally made. When in reality, having an enablement presence and way of thinking about what you're doing can make a huge difference to the ramp and scale for any startup business.
It sounds like this is going to be a great book for leaders, for enablement professionals, and really laying a foundation.
I've heard good feedback from folks. Anybody who takes a moment to read it, it's a relatively straightforward read. I'd love to hear what you think.
And I'm just curious, Sharon, what inspired you to write the book? I know so much goes into writing a book.
I would imagine a lot of us who are drawn to these early stage nascent business functions that are new on the scene, get pulled into these conversations around writing a book. And that's what happened with me. Back when I was at VMware, it's really the early days of me leaning into enablement as a profession. Although the reality was I'd done significant enabling as a sales leader in my past. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was that this was becoming this profession that I could make a career out of. And I continue to love it and be thrilled to be part of it today. But the book was something that a number of friends encouraged me to do. It's really challenging. Unless you have a lot of free time, I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking something like this on, but it was a good personal challenge for me.
That's so
And
exciting.
I hope that other folks find it valuable.
Yeah. Anyone listening, definitely pick up that book. I'm really excited to have that out there. And then also, I know for those in their enablement careers, you're doing a little bit of coaching.
I am doing a little bit of coaching, and I have a couple of spots open coming up for this fall period, September going into the end of the year, if people are interested. And it's really along the same lines as the book. And the more that I can support and invest in people in this career that I love, hopefully in the future we'll all be in a room someday and everyone will be relaxed and just get and understand just how strategic enablement is. And I don't know, we'll continue to attract fantastic talent to this really important business function.
Yeah. And it sounds like definitely those listening in, take Sharon up on that. She's got a few spots left, but if you're looking to evolve, just like we're talking about today, this is a great opportunity. Sharon, where can people reach you if they're curious to learn more about the book, more about our topic today, or just even the coaching?
Sure, of course. So probably the easiest and most direct way is through LinkedIn. I think my profile is Sharon Little 001 and my contact information is there. Anyone with an enablement background, I accept a connection for. Reach out and we'll take the conversation from there.
Awesome. Sharon, thank you so much. And for those listening, we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Sharon. Chat soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Rapid Enablement Podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast or want to support us, please like and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and of course, LinkedIn. Make sure to hit the notification button as well to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Also, this podcast is designed to serve you, the sales enablement professional. Is there a topic you are curious to hear more about? Let us know. Drop us a line on LinkedIn or check us out on our website, therapidενablementpodcast.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.